All right, grown-ups, it's just our time. I love the babies, but to help you, I gotta speak my mind. This segment's here to help you grow with book reviews, lessons, and things you'll be glad to know. If your little one's restless or looking to play, send them to my other playlist. The read-alouds there will brighten their day. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Teacher Lady Show. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Teacher Lady Speaks. I'm Miss Erica, the Teacher Lady, your fairy godparent when it comes to sharing joyful stories and growing young minds. Now, every single week on the Teacher Lady Show, we have a new topic. And of course, we use picture books to be able to learn all about it. So this week's topic is all about creative expression and creative writing, as well as poetry. We want children to be encouraged to write, to storytell, and to paint that picture by way of a pen, okay? And of course, like I said, we're using picture books to be able to do so. So this week's featured Read Aloud and Behind the Book review is on Go Get 'em Tiger. This book is definitely going to inspire all people to start writing. Now, for today's episode of the Teacher Lady Speaks, I will be diving into resources, insights, best practices, and using my experience as a well-seasoned educator to help you to raise a child that is more invested in writing. You ready? Let's grow. Defining the topic for a child. If I was explaining creative writing to a child, I would go through and look at all the books we always love and read. I would explain that so many things that they're passionate about comes back to, well, creative writing. That TV show that you love likely started with the script, and that script was written by somebody using their creative ability, okay? That song that you love, that's creative writing. That book you can't put down, that's creative writing. So many of the things that we adore and appreciate, from good ads and marketing copy on down to our favorite book that we can't put down, goes back to the ability to write and the power of creative writing. And that's how I would introduce the idea of creative writing, storytelling, and poetry to a child. Now, looking at what states teach. Every single week on the Teacher Lady Speaks, we compare two states so that you get a better idea of what your child might be learning on the topic in their classroom. So we compare the state of Texas to the state of California. We look at their curriculum to see if there is anything about, in this case, creative writing embedded into that curriculum. Now, as always, I say just because it's in the state's curriculum does not always mean your child is actually learning it. Curriculum are state requirements, but how your child learns and whether or not they're paying attention to the educator and whether or not the educator is even good at teaching all kind of come into play on whether or not they get the knowledge. So I always say, if it is important to you, regardless of if the state curriculum says it's being taught, you have to make sure that you implement those things at home so that we know that your child has it. So let's take a look at the state of California. California's approach to creative expression is embedded in English language arts standards and the California Art Standards under Literary Arts strand. So California ELA standards for K through 2 students use drawing and writing to explore ideas around foundational creative writing. Moving on up for grades 3 to 5, children are required to write narratives with imagination, descriptive detail, and expressive voices. So this is when you start to see some of those short stories as well as like settings, where the story took place, and adjectives, and adding in more details into your writing. That's around this grade. Then under language standards, it is emphasized to use figurative language, sensory words, and playful use of vocabulary. So almost like these building blocks to poetry. Under the California Art Standards, you have creating, which states that students generate and develop writing using imagination, experimentation, and revision. You have responding, RE7 through RE9, which is students analyze poems and respond to creative works using emotional and personal connections. And you have connecting, CN10 through 11, where students relate poetry to their own lives and cultures, strengthening identity and self-expression. So in California, creativity is treated as a developmental skill, one that grows through exploration, revision, and joyful experimentation. So in California, creative writing is treated as a developmental skill, one that grows through exploration, revision, and joyful experimentation. Moving on to Texas. So Texas teaches creative writing and poetry through the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills Framework for English Language Arts. For grades K through 2, they state that students compose literary texts, including poems, by writing imaginative stories and using sensory language. Moving on to grades 3, students write poems that express feelings, use imagery, and experiment with structure. And then for grades 4 through 5, students write literary texts, including poetry, and use sensory details, figurative language, rhythm and rhyme, line break stanzas, and creative structure. So across grades in Texas, students are required to plan, draft, revise, edit, and publish, a cycle that does align with My Pencil and Me, which models how creativity flows imperfectly, courageously, and with practice. And Texas poetry is treated as a formal literary skill, but one that must reflect personal expression and imagination. Resources. These resources are going to help your child to pick up that pencil, and they might just help you too, okay? The first is Young Writers Project. Now, Young Writers Project is an online creative writing playground where kids can submit stories, poems, and creative challenges. They can comment on other young writers' work. They can join in on prompts and receive real feedback. It builds confidence and community while giving children a safe space to express themselves. Next, there is poets.org, Poetry for Kids Interactive Portal. This site offers animated poems, kid-friendly recordings, interactive writing prompts, and build-a-poem activities that help children play with structure and rhythm. It makes poetry approachable, joyful, and hands-on. Now, I will say that out of the resources that I've shared, this one is going to have the most kind of help and support when it comes to putting things in for your child, which I'm actually not a fan of. I do feel like the website offers articles and suggestions, but the whole build a poem thing, because if you want a child to be strong in creative writing, you have to just let them flow. You telling them what to start a sentence with, or what to end it with, or what to put in the middle takes away from them kind of exploring and seeing things for themselves. But there's still some really good stuff on that website. Just wanted you to keep that in mind. The next resource is storybird.com. Now, this is a visual storytelling platform where children create illustrated poems and short stories using professional artwork. The artwork inspires imagination, supports reluctant writers, and makes writing feel like play rather than pressure. Next, we have Scholastic Story Starters Machine. Now, if you don't know about Scholastic, they are the ones that put on most book fairs, very embedded in terms of books and reading, and they do have a platform called Story Starters Machine, which is a fun, free Scholastic online tool that generates random creative writing prompts for kids in different genres. So this can be adventure, fantasy, sci-fi. They use virtual spinning wheels for characters, settings, and plot twists to help elementary students overcome writer's block and start stories in fun formats like letters or postcards. So it's designed to spark imagination, allow kids to generate unique ideas within their writing. The next resource we're going to talk about is Read, Write, Think interactive poetry tools. So this educational site provides child-friendly poetry creation tools across different genres. They're also going to have some of the poetry builders I was speaking about earlier, but they also have really cool things like comic strips, layouts. So sometimes when it comes to children and getting them to creative write, you have to put it in a way in which they're going to be able to relate to it the most. And sometimes that is a blank kind of comic strip or a storyboard to let them explore. And so this website really helps with that. And then the last website I love, it is my favorite on the list, and I happen to be an alumni. This is called Youth Speaks. Now, Youth Speaks offers youth-centered writing, poetry workshops, mentorships, performance opportunities, and more that help young people develop confidence, literacy skills, and find their own voice. They also provide educator resources for schools and partnerships and community events that support creative expression and social emotional learning. Now, Youth Speaks is in the Bay Area. It is located and housed in the Bay Area. But even if you are not in the Bay Area, I would definitely go check out the website, go check out their pages. Youth Speaks does a lot of work with other writing places around the country, especially through something called Brave New Voices, which is their annual poetry slam. And so there's just a lot to kind of gain from being locked into their newsletter and getting information in terms of raising a baby that is creative in their writing. I joined Youth Speaks, specifically Spokes, which is a part of the Youth Speaks program that gives youth a voice, when I was 12 years old. I was very, very young coming into Youth Speaks. Matter of fact, I don't think that you can be 12. I think that there's a higher cutoff, but I was always special. Now, Youth Speaks really does build a community around creative writing and slam poetry, spoken word poetry. And so I remember going to Youth Speaks and being able to join in on workshops, which really challenged my writing and pushed my writing. I was able to participate in multiple slam and youth poetry competitions, and I won a lot of them. I won Brave New Voices, which means that I was on the Bay Area team to be able to travel and compete against different cities. I was able to travel with them. It opened me up to so much. But what it really does do is it pushes your own creative boundaries. And that is so important when you want a child to be able to storytell, when you want them to be able to write copy. They have to be able to challenge the way in which they say something. You can say the wall is blue, or you can say the wall reminds me of the color of a sky. You can say it smells like chicken, or you can say the scent hit my nose and reminded me of home. There are so many beautiful ways to articulate the thing that you're trying to share. And Youth Speaks really was almost this foundation for that for me. I am now an author and an illustrator of 9 children's books, and I can honestly say it's because my writing was challenged as a child. It started in my childhood. All of the writing that I do for this show started in my childhood. Everything from the description of the show to talking about it to being able to write about it all comes from having my creative writing be challenged and pushed and nurtured in this really beautiful way. Now, along those same lines, I do believe that so much comes from children competing. And so I would compete in these different poetry slams. And with competing, I had one time where I fumbled and I did not like it. And it was enough for me to pretty much never fumble again. And when you have a child who is really interested in something and you put them up and they get to slam against other people and they get to listen to other people's artwork, it does something for them. And so in childhood, it was very much so like we liked the workshops and we liked the community. And it was a way for me to kind of get some of the tough things that I was going through out. It was a way for me to express myself. But in adulthood, it's become my livelihood. I got my position as executive director being able to write that cover letter and being able to write that resume. And I put it in hot pink, and it really stood out to that nonprofit board. My books and the awards that I've won from my books is my ability to write and self-advocate when something is not right or when I'm accused of something, being able to type it up and put it into an email. The ability to write is essential. It is crucial for raising a child who can be self-sufficient and navigate their way through the world. And so even if you're not near Youth Speaks, finding a way to get your child invested in creative writing is so important. And now I'm kind of getting into best practices, but having your child understand that writing is songs. That rap song you like, somebody wrote that down. Even if it sounds like that, it was written down first. That story that movie, the ad on the train station, all of it is writing. All of it is creative writing. All of it is the ability to write. It is extremely important. It is how we communicate with each other, and it is effective and efficient in whatever it is you want to do in your world. Let's keep growing. Best practices at home. One of them is you got to get that baby a journal. You have to get them a journal, and get them a journal that is going to interest them. Maybe that means it's a journal with a passcode on it, or maybe that means it's a journal with a bunch of pink sparkly glitter. It doesn't much matter, but to have an outlet is going to be very important for raising creative writers. They have to have the ability to write. Those pens and that paper mean everything. Along those same lines, you want to respect that child's journal. You are not going to read their journal. You're not going to go through. That needs to be a place to where they feel comfortable expressing themselves. Another best practice is to expose them to spoken word poetry. So often we want children to do things they've never seen before. If they have no idea what creative writing is, if they don't understand storytelling, how do you expect them to be part of it? And so there are poetry slams that are available on YouTube that I would show my child. I would take them to a poetry competition. I would get them more involved in understanding the different ways that you can use creative writing, because the more that they see it, the more that they might be interested in it, and then from there can practice their craft. The next best practice is to bring whatever your child is interested in back to writing. You want to be a rapper, you want to be a trap rapper, drill rapper, whatever you call it, that's great. You got to be able to write. You can't freestyle everything. You can't get in the studio like I'm a freestyle again. You have to be able to write that song, okay? You want to be a football player or whatever else, and you want to go to the NFL, that's great. You need to be able to read your contract and then have the ability to write in response to that contract. If the contract is not right, you need to be able to write. There is nothing in the world you can convince me of that you can do effectively and efficiently without the ability to be able to creatively write. They're tied to everything. You want to be a chef. Maybe one day you want to do a recipe book. What you got to do? You got to write. You want to be a movie director. What you got to do? You got to write. You got to leave notes. You got to review the script. You got to make notes on the scripts. Having the ability to write and to share your story by way of text is extremely important. There is also a historical element when it comes to writing. We understand things like different situations that have happened throughout the United States because we can go back and read about them. Our great-grandparents wrote that letter. There were letters written when people were in Vietnam or fighting this war, doing that, and it gives us historical perspective. And so there is also a part of being part of society that requires us to be able to write. But tie it back to your child. They love Gabby's Dollhouse. Who wrote the script for Gabby's Dollhouse? When did the script take place? How do you write a script? What is a script? Right now, my daughter is learning lines in her dance class, and she's able to see, okay, friend one, friend two. Where do these things come from? Somebody put them there. And I would say creative writing is more powerful now than ever because it is now more at risk for being lost than ever before. With all of these AI, artificial intelligence, and you can just type into a website and say, give me a song that sounds like Lil Wayne, and they'll spit something out. It's quite scary, the times that we're living in. But no robot will be able to replicate human creation. We are storytellers. As people, that is something that connects us culture to culture. We pass down stories. We talk about folk tales. We have messages that we pass down. Writing is essential, and you have to get your child to understand that. And the only way to really get them to understand that is to bring it back to something that they are interested in. That video game you love, that's writing. Coding, but writing nonetheless. You have to be able to write. Now, my last best practice, I would say, when it comes to creative writing, besides the obvious of writing, is to make sure that your child can they write? Can they write their name? Can they write a sentence? Do they understand how penmanship works, because we have to start there. It's almost like the foundation. I want to move us away from recording on our phone. The other day, I took a student's phone and he was recording this rap on his phone and, whatever, freestyling on the phone. And I was like, you can write it. I need my phone to finish it. You can write it. But if the child can't write, then they can't write it, and they have to rely on that voice recording. So the more, again, technology we have, the more we are at risk for losing the art of writing and of storytelling. So really encourage your child to write, especially if they know how. Encourage them to creative write. You can give them a topic and let them flow with it. You can introduce them to different forms of poetry. Can you put it in a haiku? One of the things that was really special about college and that really challenged my writing after Youth Speaks was I would have to do a paper, and the paper would have a limit of 500 words, let's say. And I would always want to put way more. I was never under, I was always over. I always wanted to put way more. And it's like, okay, how can I say more with less words? How can I be more mindful about the words that I'm choosing? How do I add more descriptive details without adding a bunch of fluff? And these are all extra words that are not needed. And so you can give your child those same challenges to get their brain flowing. And there are so many prompts and resources available that I listed in this episode that will help you to be able to do so. When to seek help. This is really if your child academically cannot write. Like if they don't have the ability to write, if they're past the grade that they should be writing at, which by second grade, the child should be able to write. And so if they are struggling, if they're struggling with penmanship, if they're struggling with writing in general, you want to definitely tap in with that child's teacher to get them help by way of tutoring or other intervention services to figure out what's going on. Because again, creative writing, the foundation of it is regular writing. And along those same lines, we are doing away with the art of cursive writing. And I have really big feelings about that as a person who has seen it kind of come out of our required curriculum. I would say to make sure that you're introducing your child to different styles of writing, such as cursive, different fonts, and figuring that piece out. But if they are struggling with writing, they might also be struggling with reading. And I would say to make sure that you check in with their teacher about some academic intervention services. Common questions. My child hates writing. What do I do? I touched on this some earlier, but anytime a child does not like to do something, you're going to have to bring it back to them. So if that child hates eating vegetables, for example, but they want to be a bodybuilder, you connect the two things. If the child doesn't want to bathe, but they got a crush on somebody, you connect the two things. You can't be in nobody's face talking and your breath all got a lot going on, right? You want to connect it back to something that is personal. So if your child hates writing, what do they like? What are they interested in? Because the foundation of whatever that is, they're going to need to write. And that's how you start to change the conversation and narrative. Also, why do you hate writing? It is the practice of writing. You can free write, you can story tell, you can do a poem, you can do a haiku, you can do a rap song. Why do you hate writing? I would bet they are challenged in their writing. When they write, can anybody else read it or understand it? Or is their writing so illegible that nobody can understand it? Do they know their letters? Do they know basic spelling? Are they struggling with the actual ability to write? Because I would bet that that is the foundation for them hating writing. Like when children say, I hate books, I don't want to read, it's usually because you have a struggle and an embarrassment when it comes to reading. And so connect the two. Connect things back to your child. Figure out what it is about your child that's making them be so adverse or push away from a certain thing, and then bring it back and get them the help that they need so that they don't have to carry that embarrassment. Let's keep growing. Does spelling matter when it comes to creative writing? I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say yes because depending on what you want to do with your creative writing, depends on whether or not somebody else is able to understand it. Okay, so let's say you do want to join a slam poetry team, well, there's going to be a lot of communication between you and the other members on that team. And if nobody can understand what it is you're saying because you can't spell basic words, there's going to be a challenge there. So again, before we get to creative writing, there are some foundational things that need to happen in order to really get that child's brain flowing on the level in which it could be. And then lastly, is there any right way to creative write? And to this, I would actually say no. I think there's different ways to creative write. If you are writing for a slam competition, you have a time limit and requirements. You have a topic. That list kind of continues. If you are writing as a way to kind of decompress and get your stress out, that's completely different. And with that, you can spell however you want to spell. I think that there are so many forms of writing for us to explore, but I feel like what's really happening is that we're taking away from the love of creative writing. It's almost becoming this blurred out art form that is so incredibly valuable and needed and is essential for so many things in our lives. So encourage your child to pick up that pencil in one way or another. Encourage them to use their journal as a way to get their stress out from that day. Encourage them to make a book or to write a movie script or a play. Encourage them to do a poetry, to write a poem, or to do a song. Encourage that creative writing because it will take them so incredibly far. And then when they go to share it with you and talk to you about it, unless they are competing, bump them up. And I'm not saying to call something that isn't good great, but I am saying to acknowledge their effort because they have started. You cannot get better at anything unless you start, and you have to start from somewhere. Okay, so whether it's them writing for stand-up comedy, them writing for a song, them writing for a play or an ad, a marketing ad, there are so many ways to take this art form, and it is an art form. And I hope that you encourage your child to explore this way of self-expression. Wow, what a week. We had some Shel Silverstein. We had some background information on my life and where I came from. We had books and so much in between. I'm so appreciative that you all are joining me on this journey, in this show, and on this channel. I thank you for learning with me, for growing with me, for being part of this book loving community. Be sure to check out the other episodes from this week. And I also want to let you know that, as mentioned, I am a creative writer. I am the author and illustrator of 9 amazing books that share stories, and those books encourage the Empathy Library. Now, the Empathy Library is a pay-it-forward initiative where we get books to children in need free to them and their families, okay? And we do this by way of your generosity. So go check out the Empathy Library, the other episodes from this week, any week you may have missed. Drop a comment, and until next time, remember to enjoy the moment or go be a joy in the moment. Bye.